Hello class. Today we'll be covering the impact of COVID-19 on mental health in the United States. In the United States, 90% of adults believe the country is in the midst of a mental health crisis. This is 3 years into the COVID-19 pandemic. Concerns about substance abuse are also high. The pandemic has affected people's mental and physical health through loneliness, loss of employment, financial insecurity, and the loss of loved ones. The objective of this study: the pandemic outbreak led to higher levels of anxiety and depression symptoms in adults. Studies show an increase during the pandemic, but the full extent is still unknown. This research aims to determine the extent of the increase and also the most affected group. Our population. This study focuses on the general U.S. adult population, specifically adults 18 through 29 years of age, who have reported increased anxiety and depression during the pandemic. The study design for this research is a cross-sectional survey that aims to determine the prevalence and the factors related to mental health outcomes. This study used a sample size of 5,000 adults and used recruiting strategies through online platforms and random digital dialing. Inclusion criteria were U.S. adults aged 18 and above, but the exclusion criteria were any individuals with pre-existing severe mental health conditions that were diagnosed before the pandemic. Randomization was not applicable for this survey study, and no, there was no control group, but comparisons were made across different demographic variables. Statistical analysis. This study performed used both univariate and multivariate analysis. Univariate analysis included using descriptive statistics to summarize the data, while the multivariate logistic regression was used to identify factors independently associated with increased anxiety and depression symptoms, while considering the potential confounders such as age, gender, income, and pre-existing health conditions. Our univariate results showed high levels of anxiety at 30% and depression at 25%. And younger adults aged 18 through 29, they showed even higher results for both anxiety at 40% and depression at 35%. The multivariate results, after controlling for confounders, younger age, lower income, and recent job loss, were significantly associated with higher anxiety and depression scores. This study concluded that the COVID-19 pandemic has significantly increased anxiety and depression among U.S. adults, mainly in our younger population. Our agreement. I would have to say I agree with the author's conclusion. The data clearly shows an increased prevalence of mental health issues, and the identified risk factors align with existing literature on the impacts of economic and social stressors on mental health. The biases observed in this study were selection biases, where this study relied on online platforms that have the potential to exclude those without internet access. Recall biases, where participants may not accurately remember or report their mental health status. Confounding variables, although many confounding variables were controlled in this study, others like coping mechanism and support systems were not measured. Missing considerations for this study were the roles of pre-existing coping strategies and support systems, which could have mitigated the impact of the pandemic on mental health. These studies were found to be acceptable and applied to the general U.S. adult population. But the exclusion of those without internet access might slightly limit that generalization. The ideal study design would be a longitudinal cohort study that could track the changes in mental health over time and establish a causal relationship between the pandemic and the mental health outcomes that we're dealing with today. Thank you.